The gold rushes of the mid-1800s saw the advent of a mining method called drift mining. This is where they would bury down deep underground to chase the ancient riverbeds that were holding gold that were long since buried by eons of time. These drift mines could be anywhere between a couple of meters deep and several hundred feet deep, and you can believe it was bloody dangerous work. Mine collapses were extremely common, and that's why the goldfields are often completely stripped of timber, so the miners could shore up their dodgy holes and create a play area for fern. Sometimes, but not always, these areas were surfaced, where the old timers removed all the soil off the top, chasing a layer of gravel that may have been sitting on top of hard-packed conglomerate. The conglomerate in our area had a rich layer of gold sitting on top of it and a rich layer of gold sitting underneath it. During the 1850 rush, they worked both of those layers. And because of how compacted the conglomerate was, the old timers never worked the conglomerate in the middle, even though it has gold in it. It was just too hard for them to process with the toolage they had available to them. And with 150 years of exposure to the elements, this conglomerate has now started to soften up a little bit, meaning that we can scrape up gold at the old drift mines. And in what seems to be tradition, I forgot my shovels, so I'm using my meat scoops, which God bless me with two of. One to scoop dirt, and the other to shakily hold a camera. The astute viewer will notice one thing: Chris, you're using a gold pan, and there's no river there. I know, Fern, it's very unimpressive, isn't it? Well, luckily for us, it rained, and we have puddles. And given we live in Australia where puddles seem to be quite a rare object to obtain, this was good news for us because there was a significant amount of gold hiding at these drift mines. And more than one time today I considered turning this stuff into a facial mask. The golden mask, I reckon that'd sell alright at the supermarket. Normally, in a river, I'd be tracing the black sand and the small amount of gold in each pan back to a good deposit, but the drift mines are a little different. You see, you're 100% relying on the rainwater runoff to reconcentrate the gold. And so it's basically pot luck. Will you find gold in the little erosion trench that ultimately is concentrated dirt over the top of ground you don't know whether or not it has gold in? If that sentence makes sense to you, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And I'll butcher more English sentences just like that one. The good news for me was that there was gold in that little erosion trench that I had picked, and this 100% relies on the fact that the conglomerate that the water is eroding actually carries a little bit of gold, and in this case, it did. However, there are several hundred acres of drift mines left available to explore, and previous experience has told us to keep looking because you just never know when you're going to hit a bonanza pan. The amount of times I've scraped up dirt from random locations at the drift mines is probably innumerable. But that's not strictly true. There's definitely going to be a way of numbering them, just I don't know how many there are and there seems to be a lot. There's actually a study done on opal fever in the gambling centers of Las Vegas to figure out what it is and if it's real, and this also applies to gold fever. And interestingly, what they found was because there's intermittent reward at random times, it elicited the same dopaminergic response as gambling. So gold fever will really hook you, which probably explains spending the better part of a decade looking for gold in strange places like this and playing in the mud. And I might be a bit biased, but isn't that every little boy's dream? Playing in the mud for a living? Whether that's with a D11 dozer or with a gold pan like this. And given that the gold was remaining consistent, I chose to keep hunting around that same area I was working. And now for a short ASMR scraping break. Oh, that was good. Do you feel better? I feel better. Moving on. To catch the stick, one must become the stick. In the same way, to catch the gold, one must become, well, an old timer really, not the gold. Golds don't have feelings. You see, by putting yourself in the old timer's shoes, you can kind of get a better appreciation of why they left behind what they left behind, and that, in turn, will kind of point you towards where the gold is. In this case, conglomerate be hard, yo, like really hard. And so there's a lot of it left just sitting around at these drift mines. Conveniently for us, this is where the gold is trapped, and so fast forward 150 years and we're able to just scrape it up off the ground. And yeah, I mean quite literally scrape it up off the ground. You see, the soil has only softened up about a couple of inches from the surface, and then it goes back down to what the old timers gave up on, which is essentially natural cement. And while I thrust at my pick, I want to tell you about my pay dirt that I have up on the oldmoldy.com.au. This is where you can literally get your hands on some of this dirt to pan yourself at home. We have pay dirt bags ranging from $22 all the way up to $370, so there's something for everyone. Spiders like this require a special export permit, so if you want one of them, you're going to need to do some paperwork. The other rare thing at the drift mines is clean fresh water, so we left a puddle aside so we could collect and use it whilst we were revealing the gold. Otherwise, trying to see yellow gold under yellow mud is not so easy. And man, the first gutter I hit that day was loaded. We were finding heaps of gold all along its length. And it wasn't long before I made my snuffer bottle go jiggle jiggle jiggle. Resisting the urge to eat some hallucinogenic mushrooms and really connect with the old timers, I wanted to see how much gold I managed to collect in a couple of hours of scraping up conglomerate. And I don't think that looks too bad, but we won't know how much we got exactly until I get it home and cleaned up, because there's these things you can't build out of sticks, and that's called scales. Alright Pocket Rocket, let's get you home and the gold all weighed up.
Who's the dirtiest girl in the whole gold fields? Is it you?
I'm pretty sure it's both of you. Fernie, you ready to get the cleanup done? Dirt! And a tiny shovel. If we're going to use a tiny shovel, we're absolutely going to use a tiny sluice. This is the gold catching thing 3000.
OH&S. And oh yeah, we're going to raw dog this dirt. No classification for us.
I wouldn't suggest following Video Chris's actions here. Classification really does help when it comes to cleaning up gold, particularly if you're dealing with Reedy Creek cons, because if you've seen any of my videos, you'll know that it's made from cassiterite, which is tin ore. You know, the stuff they make roofs in Australia out of, where you hear the rain on it and makes you go, ah, McCain, you've done it again. That is unapologetically a very Australian reference, and if you don't get it, perhaps Googling or YouTubing that ad will be worth your time. But what isn't worth your time is struggling with heaps of black sand. That's why I love using these little cleanup sluices, just to speed the whole process up. And what I'm proud of is seeing so much gold come out of the drift mines. Given I could only use a hand pan and a puddle, I think this is pretty good.
Not too bad for old conglomerate.
No matter how many fancy gadgets or gadgets I own, I always seem to end up hand panning down the cons to get the final amount. And in this particular case, I used the wrong pan and didn't really get my gold that clean. I actually filmed that video 3 years ago, and I'm super happy to have finally got rid of the concentrates that were taking up a valuable pan in my shed. The drift mines are by far one of the coolest places I get to work here in the northeast of Victoria. It's so nice to know that we're picking up gold that the old timers never even accessed. It's all virgin conglomerate, so as it decays, more and more gold is going to be released. If only I was allowed to use like a D11 dozer in there and really get some dirt moving. Given it was just a couple hours of prospecting, let's see how much gold we ended up getting. Mushroom for scale. I've certainly had bigger takes of gold from the drift mines, but I've certainly had a lot less. And I've certainly done better jobs on the cleanup. To help me get the gold on the scales, I've got a wonderful Christmas card that I received from one of my amazing subscribers. Thank you so much for sending this all the way from Texas. Christmas card delivery of gold seems to be the best way to deliver gold to the scales, and it was good news. I'm going to say that because there's still a lot of contaminants in there, we probably got a 0.45, somewhere in that range. But given gold's 140 Australian dollars a gram at the moment, that's worth like 60 whole Australian dollars, which is not too shabby for a couple of hours work in the evening.